A bright, golden sun rose in the morning over the small village of Adi. If someone were looking up at the rooftops of the village, or from a distance, one would be able to see a figure climbing over the rooftops. Given that Adi was a farming town, that was a tall order, as most were out in the fields and only those too young, too old, or skipping the work were still home. Aja of the Mode's household was climbing a specific house, of the 20 or so actual buildings here. Aja was a young woman of vigor, her musculature thick not just from farm work, but also from her own activities like this. She climbed to the edge of the building, the second floor of the Asa household, and hung upside down easily with her legs. "Hey Arnaud, wake up!" She called out with a sonorous boom inside the room, causing the boy who was still asleep inside to shriek in terror and tumble out of his bed. He. Arg. Waysat for? The boy scrambled to his feet, while his neighbor's face beamed with mischievous glee. Practice. You know that the Nitri exam occurs whenever 3 people reach the age of majority in town, right? Right? Aja climbs inside, knocking over a pile of books that rested at the foot of the bed. "It's my year, Arn." "Hey." Arn collected the books and neatly stacked them onto the table. "That's true, but only when 3 or more young adults cross that age. It's not for us. No commonry has succeeded at the test in over 500 years. However, I'm going to be the youngest commonry to pass the test and become a knight." She was jumping up and down on his bed now, the make barely holding together from the exerted strength. "Oh sure. No one amongst the commonry has been accepted into the Nitri in over 700 years. Arn walks over to a hand-bound blood on a shelf that was rife with others and scrolls. "You want to not only be the first, but be the youngest? Oh, you're being a spool." "I am not. Get out of my house. You're just lazy, sleeping in. My father's the town historian. I have my own duties to prepare for." The screaming between the two stops when there is a series of heavy thuds up the steps. Suddenly the door is opened, and behind an older-looking man who Aja recognized as Arn's father, was the hulking form of her mother. "Hi. Mom." She moves the man, who looks like he might actually be Arn's grandfather, aside like a pile of twigs barring her path. Her full 6 feet tower in the room as Arn gently moves aside. "Why are you here instead of at work?" She says slowly and pointedly, giving her daughter a moment to formulate an answer. Arn just focused on collecting the books and writing stones that had been knocked over. "I'm here to let Arn know." Aja smiled mischievously, grabbing his arm. "That will be competing in the Nitri test." The room fell into silence, Arn himself turning pale. "You're too young." The head of house mode cleared Aja a way through after a decisive and quick denial. "Not if we compete as a pair." Aja's face hadn't lost that smirk. Per the code of Nitri, a pair can compete even if they're under the age of majority. That can't be true, is it? Lady Mode turned to Arn's father, who looked confused to be put on the spot so suddenly. I'll have to check." He left downstairs, gliding along the stairwell in a surprisingly smooth movement. Arn had described the man as nimble as a spider, despite looking to have the musculature of one. Having been moved to the table downstairs, Arn looked incredulously at Aja as she whistled to herself. Eventually old man Asa returned from the library. "So?" Aja grinned from ear to ear as Mr. Asa sighed and righted his glasses. "Yes. She is correct. In the writing of the official rules of the Nitri exam, if 2 compete together, they may attempt the test. It hasn't been done in ages, but she is correct. By the binder." Aja's mother swore and threw up her arms. "If it's to be so. Hey, don't I get a say in this?" Arn fumed, not happy with being dragged along. "I never asked to be part of the Nitri test. Unfortunately, per the law, once the right to the test is invoked, it's up to the pair's parents to decide if it can be reneged." Mr. Asa fixed his glasses, but his eyes kept the solemn look as he turned to the house head of Mode. I want you to take it then, just so you'll finally learn that your place is tilling the fields like the rest of us. Arnaud's face sunk at that decision. But, father. Arn stood up. I don't want to be a knight, that's for splendories. They're forced to go do dangerous, horrendous things for the realm. My place is to be the next historian. Unfortunately, as it's been invoked already, well, us commonries have never passed the test anyways, so there's little to worry about. Old man Asa patted Arn on the shoulders as the boy put his face in his hands. You have 1 week to prepare, as the Knightry Proctor is already on their way for the 3 young adults who came of age last season. That won't be a problem. Aja seemed to be the only one in the building to be truly elated at this course of events. 7 days later, Aja and Arn were up at the crack of dawn, the crowning day after a week of dragging Arn to train in the mornings. He'd given up fighting, being woken up so early, and Aja was refused assistance in training from the 3 over Audi candidates. Both of you competing? What a load. This is just a duty of all who live in the realm. We commonries never get to become knights, it's just tradition that we get the test. Moema, Levin, and Noah just laughed in her face, and Arn was left nervously explaining the situation. We'll show them, right Arn? Arn didn't respond, looking at the wooden sword on the ground that Aja carved for him after carving her own. Do you even care what I think? Aja stopped cutting at the Borosian tree, white marks bubbling up from its thick bark. Are you still mad? Of course I'm mad. This is humiliating. Arn picked up the sword and swung it hard enough to almost fall over due to lacking the balance. 1 week to prepare. He swung up and the sword bounced off of the tree and hit him in the face. No actual equipment. Yeah. But at least it's something to do. Every day here is so boring. Aja winced and helped Arn to his feet. That's what we want though. What do you want to happen here? Arn was too worked up to let the pain on his forehead to stop him from gesturing to the town. We haven't had anything go bad here in hundreds of years. We have the knightly order to thank for that. Don't you want to know how they do it? Aja stepped up to his face, looking him in the eye. I know you're curious as to what they actually do. Arn sat down, exasperated, and rubbed his forehead. All right. Yeah. I want to know. Arn walked over to where their home clothes were in a pile. They'd come in their work clothes to avoid dirtying them. He pulled out a homebound book and sifted through it. Honestly, we might as well give it a shot. I would be able to add so much more to our histories. Great. Aja paused a moment, watching Arn read through the book but not pick up the sword again. What about training? I can probably help more by looking at the historical accounts of what the test was like. Oh. Right. Aja realized while training herself and Arn for combat they never did figure out what the test was about. I remember that the actual task isn't revealed until the day it occurs. Yes. I noticed that. However, reading through the records I found interviews with previous examinees. The test involves entering the Nameless ruins. Arn motioned out into the forest, to the northeast. Whoa! Aja gasped, before grinning. I've always wanted to go there. It's forbidden, outside of the exam. Apparently well, supposedly there's more than one. They have ties to the Nameless kingdom. Whenever that was. Aja squatted down, listening intently to the young historian. Well. Once there was a kingdom who ruled the entire world. Supposedly, the source of their power was a magic spell that was able to destroy an entire nation. Arn began, reciting the story from memory rather than from the book. The entire world? How? What could have happened to them if they could blow up a whole nation? Aja waited until Arn got more comfortable and continued his story. Well, it's said that the spell was not a weapon, at least not how we see it. The spell caused a nation it is used against to lose all written or etched records, forget its history, and the resultant population disseminates into smaller tribes with no memory of what they were once before. That's scary. You'd never even know something even happened to you. Aja looked out towards where pieces of ruin broached the treetops. Yeah. No one knows what happened to that nation, but it's proposed that someone used their own magic against the kingdom itself. Arn motioned to the spires of the spleeteries visible even over the forest. From here in the clearing that began where the forest ended, they could see the Night Proctor's entourage approaching. Even here the shiny armor of the Nightry shimmered with the early morning sun. And that's why it's called the Nameless Kingdom? Aja didn't seem to make too much notice of their approach, too invested in Arn's amateur history lesson. Yeah. A lot of the ruins around are from that kingdom, but we don't know how long ago that kingdom even fell. Hence why we're not supposed to go there. Why have the test go there then? Who knows? Hear ye, hear ye. The clanging of steel had since stopped as the 4 knights who escorted the proctor stood at attention and 3 people stood at the front of the crowd of townsfolk. I shall read off the names of those undertaking the Nightry exam in the village of Audi. When your name is read off, please respond with present. The sooner this is finished, the sooner you can get back to your daily lives. The 4 knights, covered head to toe in armor, clanged their spears against the ground. Moima of the Zdenko family. Present. A young woman with a worker's musculature, seemingly fresh from the fields, answered and stepped forward. Levin of the Soren family. Present. A confident young man, his fingers taped from accidents on the loom, stepped forward. Noah of the Petronia family. Present. Another young woman, hunting bow on her back and dressed in furs. Excellent. I shall now give you the instructee. The proctor stopped when they noticed that the village historian of House Azza raised his hand. Yes, historian? We have an additional 2 contenders, Proctor Edel. There are no others of the age required present. The proctor spoke plainly, to some snickering from the townsfolk of Audi. Please do not waste any more time. Indeed. They are invoking the 3rd rite of the Codex. Historian Azza explained matter-of-factly, to now confused murmuring. The 3rd rite? The proctor finally broke their monotone. The currently available edition contains 462 provisions. Who would invoke the 3rd? True, it is an old rite, but it has been invoked nonetheless. The old historian motioned to the 2 young people trying to shove their way through the crowd. Proctor Edel sighed with contempt that leaked through their visor. Very well. Be aware that you only have 1 chance at this examination. What are your names? The proctor waited patiently for the 2 to push out from the crowd and stand at attention with wooden swords next to the leather and steel armor-clad of age candidates. Aja of the Modes. Aja was at attention correctly, even with the wooden sword standing in for a real one. Arnaud of the Azza. Arn was notably less balanced and didn't hold his sword the right way while at attention. If this is some joke, I would recommend you cease it now. The proctor glared down at the youths. While nominally safe, you are forbidden from assistance during the test. If danger comes upon you, you could die. Now, you can back out at any time. Aja's mother called out from over the other villagers. We understand. Aja grinned in retaliation, while the other 3 of age candidates made it plainly visible that they didn't wish to look at the 2. Arn's face was bright red from the embarrassment of being set in front of the whole village. Very well. The proctor returned to their poise while reciting the rules of the exam. Now, since you have your instructions, head to the unknown temple headed northeast of this village. Once you get there, the test itself will begin. You'll know if you passed or not. All right? Arn and Aja looked at each other in a bit of confusion since the explanation just listed a bunch of restrictions on help, and not anything about what they were supposed to do. The others already marched off on their own, towards that goal with food bags and maps already on their person. The two of them were left with their wooden swords, work clothes, and the food Aja and Arn prepared for their training. There's supposed to be a road that goes by it. Arn remembered vaguely. Within a few hours they were already mostly lost since neither had an actual map. Really? I didn't know that roads go this way at all. Aja cut down some fruit from a tree she'd climbed to get a better look. It was from older times, not likely to be found unfortunately. Arn reminded her of the issue with any clues regarding the Nameless Kingdom. If you try to give it a name or a location on a map, it just disappears. So maybe the trick is to not look for it? Didn't some examinees find it after all? Yes. At least half were able to find the ruin, but even then none of them passed the test. Arn contemplated the strategy she'd suggested before a cloth was put over his face. Hey. I can't see. Neither can I. Maybe that'll get us there. Aja pushed Arn forward over and over, and they had to navigate by guessing where their feet were falling. Stop pushing. Arn got annoyed after the fourth time he almost fell into a puddle of, well, something. It was getting chilly out, which meant that they were out past noon already. However, before Arn could complain again, he felt stone under his feet. I think. Can you feel that? It feels so smooth. It's the road. Arn had taken off the makeshift blindfold, and indeed they were on a partially overgrown stone road that went off in two directions perpendicular to them. Well, which way now? Aja pulled out her wooden sword, glancing about for danger. Well, that way looks completely overgrown. Arn motioned to the road leading to the right. And I don't trust us stepping off the road and then finding it again, so let's go left. Arn and Aja shared some food as rations, as the day grew longer and nighttime was approaching. How long did we have? Aja asked Arn after he began preparing a torch. Until we fail, give up, or die. He lit the torch, only to jump back as in the growing shadows now parted by the light was a stone wall. Oh, wow, we're here. I think. They traced the wall along its edge, which was now tied to the stone road. There's no symbols on anything. Aja mused in wonder as the large structure revealed itself in the light of the torch as night took hold. Yeah. We must be here. Arn peeked around back and forth. It doesn't seem like the others are here yet. There's been no sounds of footsteps but our own. The uncertainty hung in the air like a fetid smell as they eventually approached what seemed to be a large door made of stone. It was shut tight. Well, we're here. How do we know how the test starts? Aja perked up and shook Arn, who seemed to be slightly nodding off to keep him awake and alert. How on earth am I supposed to know? The huge door had shapes making it up, but nothing concrete enough to appear to be a symbol worth investigating. Arn and Aja pressed their hands against the door in an attempt to force it open only for it to not budge. Does this mean we've failed? Aja crossed her arms in disappointment as Arn kept running his hands along the sides of the doors. Maybe? We can just go back if you want tea. Arn was cut off as a completely unassuming piece of the wall lit up with strange sigils and markings that circled around his hand. You did it? Aja wasn't sure if this was cause for celebration for a good moment, before there was a loud, echoed, stone-cracking sound and the doors began opening of their own accord. In a brief moment, the doors had opened fully, and all of the rumbling ended. Well, the proctor said we'd know when it started and when it finished. Arn shrugged, and Aja was already taking her first steps inside. Inside was white marble-like stone along the floor, ceiling, and the walls. There were no windows, but strange blue lines glowed as they ran along the walls and the floor. The ceiling released a white glow that shone throughout, meaning they didn't need the torch anymore. This place is so amazing. Aja nearly tore the carpeting by just stepping on it, the material worn down with time. It looks like no one's been here for a long time. Arn was a lot more cautious. It looks familiar to the descriptions written down in the histories. As the pair explored the entryway, the tunnel's deeper beckoned, and through the next pathway was a great hall. It was shimmering, beautiful. Neither had seen anything so spectacular in their lives. The very chairs and table were made of a dainty-looking pearl-like stone, but were much bigger than normal chairs and tables. They were tougher too, as Aja tried to break them with the wooden sword only to bounce off. Wow, it's so clean! Aja climbed into the chair to get onto the table and walked around on top of it, ignoring Arn's requests for her to avoid doing that. It's like I'm dreaming. I can't understand what the goal is, it seems to just go on and on. Arn was hesitant as past the strange eating hall was a series of huge tunnels. One could probably drive 2 full oxen-drawn carts through here easily. Side by side, they splintered throughout in a maze. Thanks to Arn bringing his writing stone, he was able to mark where they had been. It's just smooth walls. I mean, they're still really pretty, but where are we supposed to be going? Aja turned to Arn, who at this point was trying his hands against any wall indentation that seemed out of place. I think there might be doors we're not seeing, like out at the entrance. Arn motioned to the large indentations that he needed to stand on the tips of his toes to reach. Aja easily lifted him up, and he was able to clearly place his hand on one. It lit up. The sounds of something in the walls ticked repeatedly and in different patterns until it formed in an upright rectangular shape, and the sound of stone cracking echoed the mechanism itself functioning. You did it! Aja cheered as the door opened to reveal a large square chamber. It seemed mostly featureless, except a raised dais near the center of it. The dais was glowing with a ruby red, pulsating light. What is that? I don't know. I think it's the test completion point. Arn scratched his head as both approached and looked at the strange indentation. Aja tried pressing her hand on it, being taller, but it did nothing. Here, let me try. Arn was lifted up again by Aja, and pressed his hand on the glowing ruby light. Suddenly it stopped glowing, and instead illegible sigils floated around him. They reacted to his hand movements, and the boy and his curiously touched them to see other strange sigils that neither could make heads or tails of. Does that mean we did it? Aja beamed, nearly crushing Arn in a hug. I don't know. Arn gasped for air. Wait. There's something. I think it's talking to me? There was some sort of knob visible, which when Arn turned it, a voice began to echo throughout the room. Fui la? Munye ye horit. The voice was soft and completely unfamiliar. It sounded vaguely feminine, but nothing about its tone gave them any indication as to its meaning. Is it someone who is trapped here? Aja let go of Arn and tried to touch the glowy floating sigils only for them to go through her hands like smoke. Is it a damsel? The night tree saves damsels. Don't you want to save a damsel with me, Arn? I guess. That'd be a pretty concrete goal and mark of success. Arn just seemed too focused on the voice, confused as to what was happening. Fui la. Fui la. The voice exclaimed, before going silent for a long moment. Port Fuljim necht Zoto Harini. It sounded like instructions, but Arn couldn't follow as it still sounded incoherent. Maybe they mean this? His hand went over a specific sigil, which opened radially into 30 others. However, there was one big, red sigil that glowed like the dais itself did. I think that's it. All right. I knew you could do it. Aja smacked Arn on the back as he was already reaching for it, removing any chance for changing his mind. Suddenly, the entire series of blue veins running through the hallways along the marble white walls turned that ruby red. I don't know if it's supposed to do that. Arn backed away, the dais turned red again, and the center of the room opened up, rising to reveal a smaller room hidden underneath. Within it was a figure that seemed at first like a woman, but she was far bigger. Compared to Arn's 5 feet and Aja's 5.5 feet, this woman stood at almost 9 feet tall. She was dressed in flowing white robes that appeared to be ceremonial but dirty from lack of care. "Is that the damsel?" Aja asked nervously as the familiar sound of cracking stone echoed out in the hallways as she peeked out and saw more and more doors similar to the one they were inside. However, instead of large women, monsters lumbered out into the hallways. Within a few moments, the braying of horrors echoed throughout the temple. Ishka-ni. The woman stood to her full height, approaching some sort of invisible but felt barrier. She motioned to Arn and to the pedestal. Fuilat-si. Arn scrambled over back to the pedestal, shaking with fear with the sounds of lumbering things crying out in hunger outside. "I think she wants to help," Arn said to a rather scared-looking Aja. With that, the pedestal stopped glowing and instead seemed to deactivate. With that went the invisible wall, holding the damsel within. She stepped out, stretching her arms wide with a grace that belied the size. She raised her finger when Aja tried to follow her outside, stopping her. "Well, does that mean we succeed?" The sound of a terribly sharp blade slicing through flesh and bone, the dying brays of monsters permeating the hallways now. The two stayed in a seemingly safe room for an hour, until the sounds outside had stopped for a while. "Let's get out of here," Arn whispered to Aja, who nodded. "Yeah, I don't think this damsel needed saving." Aja peered outside first and saw several corpses of massive creatures whose coils and gates took up a majority of the hallway. Slowly, she had to drag Arn by the arm to get him to walk through the menagerie of corpses. Sliced, crushed, blown open. "Aja, what did we do?" "I don't know. I think we succeeded at the exam. We should get home and tell the proctor." They passed through the once pristine, pearl-carved feasting hall. Now it was drenched in blood and body parts of monsters. At least here some remains seemed describable. A turtle-like creature with a scorpion tail and feathered wings growing out of its back seemed to still be breathing, the cracked shell holding most. Once they reached the outside, the morning sun greeted them. That, and the damsel sitting by the ancient road, reclined in the light of the morning sun. She appeared to be singing, but the mouth wasn't moving. Instead, sigils floated by her head that they seemed to be able to hear. "We should thank her and just go." Arn smiled nervously at Aja, but as they tried to move past her, she snapped upright faster than they even thought of her size could. Her movements were more like a snake's as she glided along the ground like she didn't require much effort. "Si. Fui la." Towering over the pair of examinees, she repeated that phrase before suddenly grabbing their foreheads. "OSH-." Even Aja's fast reflexes weren't enough, as after they were both grabbed, those sigils streamed down from the damsel's wrists along their bodies. It sounded like bones were cracking. Aja could see Arn's face frozen in panic, but there wasn't any pain. In a few seconds it was done, and both were released. "What did you do to us?" "Goho Jalai Neki. Torakat Si. Mozak eyes." The only words spoken before the damsel raised her hands, seemingly conducting the sigils in the air. From the sigils, lines formed in the air, carving shapes out of nothing. One, an elaborate sword, the other, a staff taller than either. With a snap of her fingers, the outlines became solid structures and fell on the ground before each. Her hands stretched forward. "Are these gifts?" Arn seemed to decipher the meaning now. The damsel said nothing, but wandered away from them into the woods. "I think so." Aja picked up the sword. The blade of it was made of the same material as the structure, while the staff seemed to be made of a rock-hard type of carved wood. Its patterns evoked water flowing around it, and it ended in a hook made of that wood. Arn picked up the staff, while Aja found the sword to be remarkably easy to wield. The real shock came when it cut through a tree in a single swing. "Oh wow! Now these are knightly weapons." As the pair emerged from the forest and saw the town as abuzz already. The proctor was still standing with the knight escorts around them as they approached. A much larger crowd than had been there before was gathered. "They're actually back." The familiar, now very relieved voice of Aja's mother echoed out to greet them. With that, the crowd erupted into cheers, as Arn and Aja saw that the other 3 examinees were back already waiting. Where were you? The night proctor seemed far less enthused at their presence. Aja looked confused at Arn and back to the proctor. We were at the nitri test. You told us we'd know when it was started and finished. Arn nodded in turn, gripping his newfound staff. The proctor turned to the other knights and back at them. The other test givers did not report your presence at the test site. This can only be counted as a disqualific dash. They were cut off as all 4 knight escorts' wrists lit up in a familiar ruby red alarm. All 4 knights drew their weapons, even dropping ceremonial weapons such as spears. Lord Knight, we're picking up a recombinant presence in the area. A female voice came from one of the knights. 2 of them. Another male came from another. There aren't any monsters here. There's something wrong, check again. The knight proctor exclaimed, as all 4 knights checked their wrists again. No, it's correct. The male voice confirmed. It's them. The female knight motioned to the 2 youths. There has never been a recorded sighting of recombinant persons. The knight proctor seemed to be getting frustrated. What happened out there? Where did you get those weapons? We went out to find the temple. Aja retold the story before either could think better of full honesty. And after she did that, she gave us these. The knights quickly circled the pair. Those weren't the testing grounds. That was a jail, and you opened it. The knight proctor raised a hand to stop the knights. Bring them with us. I've never heard of a person being found in one of these, and these children may be the key to finding them. End of part 1. I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters. Plugist, Strix Luna, Galina Lavina.